In chapter 1, we talked about the class struggle and the relationship between the proletariat and the bourgeoisie. Chapter 2 now tackles the relationship between the proletariat and the communists. It addresses some of the counter-arguments against communism and then gives us some suggestions of what to do next if we want to get to a communist society. Marx and Engels begin by stating that communists shouldn't necessarily form parties of their own, since their interests aren't separate from those of the working class parties. They distinguish themselves from working class parties only in that they're not limited to any one nation. And they always and everywhere represent the interest of the movement as a whole, whatever that means. Other than that, their aims are the same as the aims of the proletariat as a whole, which is the overthrow of the bourgeois supremacy and conquest of the political power by the proletariat. Among those goals are the abolishment of the bourgeois property, which the Communist Manifesto is very eager to point out doesn't mean the abolishment of property overall, but the abolishment of private property. If that scares you, the manifesto argues that in our existing society, for 9 out of 10 people, private property already doesn't exist. One of the main arguments used by people disagreeing with communism is that no one will work if private property is abolished. However, if that was true, bourgeois society should have been overcome with laziness long ago. In reality, a lot of people working now don't really acquire any property anyways, and a lot of people just live off their property and don't work. Because wage labor, according to the manifesto, doesn't create property for the worker anyways. It creates capital for the industrialist. That capital, however, is the result of a lot of people's labor process. Therefore, it is not a personal but a social power. When therefore capital is converted into common property, into the property of all members of society, personal property is not thereby transformed into social property. It is only the social character of the property that is changed. It loses its class character. The manifesto now goes on to address some of the criticism leveled against it by its opponents. The bourgeoisie maintains that communists want to abolish individuality and freedom, and rightly so. The abolition of bourgeois individuality, bourgeois independence, and bourgeois freedom is definitely what the communists are trying to achieve. The freedoms of the capitalist society are free trade, free selling, and free buying, which the communist movement wants to abolish. It wants to abolish them because it thinks that those are what contributed to the exploitation of the worker in the first place. This is one of those examples where you can see Marx and Engels sharply taking an opposition to the bourgeois definition of freedom. Freedom was, even in the time when the Communist Manifesto was written, a term largely politicized and branded by liberal and classical philosophers and economists. Or as Marx and Engels would call them, the bourgeois intellectuals. And if you tune into politics today, at least when it comes to American politics, it is still largely used by a certain political spectrum. Marx now addresses how communism apparently wants to abolish the family. He says that modern bourgeois family is based on capital and private gain, and this is something that he does want to stop. Do you charge us with wanting to stop the exploitation of children by their parents? To this crime we plead guilty. He doesn't want to abolish education, he simply wants to free it from the control of the ruling class. Now the manifesto addresses the accusation that communism wants to take away countries. The working men have no country. We cannot take from them what they have not got. Marx and Engels don't really write in opposition to countries, but they just aren't really that interested in nations. Commerce in a global market by the bourgeoisie has made it necessary that the proletariat rise up internationally, to end not just the exploitation of the proletariat, but also to end the practice of one nation exploiting a different nation. To the criticism from a religious, philosophical, or ideological standpoint, Marx and Engels just say the charges against communism made from a religious, a philosophical, or generally from an ideological standpoint are not deserving of serious examination. They dismiss it by saying that the ideas of the ruling class have always supported the standing of the ruling class. And of course they're going to attack anything that threatens their status. Communism aims to abolish eternal truths. It abolishes all religion and all morality. Because the communist movement is so radical in its aims, it will always be met with fierce resistance. The working class must overcome that resistance and make itself the ruling class. It will then use its political power to seize all capital from the bourgeoisie and centralize the means of production under the control of the state. What exactly needs to happen then is of course different in every country. However, Marx and Engels have a few measures that are generally applicable in most advanced countries. Number 1. Abolish land as property of private individuals and thereby abolish rent. Number 2, establish a heavy progressive or graduated income tax. Number 3, abolish all inheritance. Number 4, confiscate the property of all immigrants and rebels. Okay. Number 5, centralize all credit with a national bank with state capital and an exclusive monopoly. Number 6, centralize the means of communication and transport in the hands of the state. That one seems like a red flag. Number 7, extend factories owned by the state and cultivate wastelands. Number 8, establish equal liability of all to work. Establish industrial armies, especially for agriculture. Number 9, combine agriculture with manufacturing industries. Gradually abolish all the distinction between town and country and establish a more equitable distribution of the population over the country. Number 10, establish free education for all children in public schools. Abolish children's factory labor in its present form and combine education with industrial production. If these suggestions are being followed, a society is one step closer to communism. In place of an old bourgeois society with its classes and class antagonisms, we shall have an association in which the free development of each is the condition for the free development of all. Alright, thanks for listening. See you in chapter 3.